Hi everybody, I'm really happy to be here at CyberTalks with Dinis Cruz, the Chief Information Security Officer for Photobox. Thank you so much, Dinis, for inviting CyberTalks to come in and run this event this evening. Very much appreciated. So for our audience that don't know who you are, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do here at Photobox.
Okay, so I'm the CISO, so I'm the one that's responsible for everything to do with security except physical security. That's sort of on facilities, but everything else kind of falls into my remit. We run multiple teams. We cover all the way from web application security all the way to factories and everything in the middle, cloud-based to data centers. So there's kind of a nice big scope. And then I've basically been involved in security for quite a long time now. I have a very strong developer background, so I've always been about solving problems, and I kind of found my way into security, got really interesting about it, and then did all sorts of things from pen testing to breaking stuff to fixing things to building teams, and now it's kind of it's quite interesting to put everything together and to really make security what I like to see as an enabler and something that adds value to the top and the bottom line of companies.
So have you always felt sort of this passionate about cybersecurity? Has it been your sort of one main path of your career in that respect?
Yeah, well, I think by now, yes. I've been doing it for quite a while now, but I think I found it. Right? I probably would say development has been a big passion. I've always done a lot of development, a lot of solving things out. I've always liked programming, and I kind of fall into sort of cybersecurity, and then it was I think the perfect combination of sort of my analytic skills, my problem-solving skills, my curiosity, driving, being a bit of a rebel, but also very fact-driven. I think I like the fact that security allows me to have very fact-driven conversations that are very objective. And I guess when you come from a sort of an exploitation point of view, in the beginning it's binary. Either you can do it or you can't do it. Sure. You can't just say, I think it's vulnerable. It's like, either you have it or you don't. Sure. And then I kind of take that to the rest of security, where I think it's very key to always drive fact-based conversations. And now I tell my board, my job is to allow them to make fact-based risk decisions. Sure. That's the game.
And how do you translate a lot of that technical basis into business risk? There's no one single way to do it. There are multiple ways that you can explain security risk in terms of business impact. But
yeah, so we try to be as objective as possible. So we now build this kind of, first of all, we build a gigantic graph. So we kind of think in graphs and connections. So we do all this stuff on top of Jira just because it's the tool we use. But so we think of vulnerabilities first as facts. So vulnerability is X can happen. And then we aggregate them in multiple ways. And then what we do is the risk is the why. Why does that matter? So you can have a SQL injection on a website. That's a vulnerability. It's a fact, right? I can do this. But why does it matter, right? There's a lot of reasons why SQL injection on a website might not even be a vulnerability, or might not have a high risk, right? So we start to ask the whys. And the whys are like a chain of whys. So the logic is that the first why would be the first reason, because I can get access to the data. All right, why does that matter? Because the data is confidential, so now I can have confidential data. And why does that matter? Because we have assets. So you build this sort of pyramid, this tree of risks that they all connect to each other, and the higher you go, the more, in a way, abstract they are, but it's still fact-based. I could still say at the top, why is that a problem? Because he has these 3 risks, who have these 20 risks, who has these 100 vulnerabilities. And that allows me, in a way, to actually put some science into risk management, right? Which I guess once I was thinking more into risk world, I was like, it was very fluffy, right? I remember thinking, there's no way I can argue that. You can't say that, right? You can't say there's a high risk of X. I'm like, where's the evidence, right? That's what the business is going to ask me, right? They're going to say, how can you validate this? And people make stuff up. I'm like, look, if we don't have data, that's a finding in itself, right? So I guess I try to approach the programming kind of concepts to sort of business to allow me to have a management conversation in the same kind of way that I would then talk and break it down to a developer or to an engineer or everybody in the middle.
Sure. So do you find now, as a sort of chief information security officer, that you're missing that part of sort of the development world that you came from, and actually it all sort of ties in very nicely to where you want to go? Or
so one of the things I tell my team is I expect them all to be on a high learning curve. I expect them all to be coding. I expect them all to be automating their work and to really spend time improving their workflows, and the same to me. So I guess I sometimes social engineer some of the work I do to still allow me to do that. So I'm still involved in some of the projects as a technical resource. The difference is I'm not there as a CISO, I'm there as somebody who can actually do that. And it's interesting because sometimes I've been in a situation where if I actually did an analysis, I said, where is the place where I will add the most value at this moment in time? It's actually there, right? It's not necessarily at sort of CISO management layer at that moment in time. It's actually being somebody who's very technical, who can still do this analysis. And so I view that as a way to keep my skills sharp. So I kind of think that there's a mistake when people get promoted because they're very good technically and then they stop doing technical stuff, which is kind of insane if you think about it, right? So I think there's a balance to be struck. And I think it's also very important to understand key technologies because I've been doing some stuff programming on top of AWS, so I feel that I'm now equipped to have a voice and I can have a very knowledgeable voice when I talk about AWS security or even other parts of AWS because I understand it. It's not a theoretical concept, right? I don't push code to production, but I understand the key concepts and I can still do it.
So do you think that then in the way that you define your own security strategy, there has to be that element of innovation and agility, so you're mapping against the type of business models that you're working to, but also you're not losing that technical capability from a delivery perspective, is effectively what you're saying, which is great.
And because it makes you more effective, right? So it's kind of like, imagine the 20% that Google talks about people should do is, it's kind of, you should do it, but in ways that makes you more effective in your work. So I view that having the technical capability allows you to think different of a problem and allows you to be very empowered for the things you want to do. So there's things that you can just get on with. So I've done things where I'll create a proof of concept and then hand over to a team, and then maybe I have a bit more experience, maybe I could do the paradigms a bit quicker, so maybe I could do it in a couple of days, and then it might take them a month to productize that. But that's fine because I show that that's possible. So I can move the conversation to maybe we should do this, to say, look, I just done it. Right? Okay, it's not productized ready, but that's your job. Now can you guys productize this, make it enterprise ready, make it solid? A really cool concept is the Simon Worley maps. I don't know if you got into that concept, but you should check it. And he talks about this idea of pioneers, settlers, and town planners, and the whole evolution of ideas. And that's kind of what you want. Sometimes you want to pioneer something where it's kind of hard-coded and it's sort of not very mature, but then you pass to the next team that's going to sort of make it a product, and then the final team makes it a commodity. So if you look at technology, the first computers were custom-made, then we build them, now it's a utility, right? Sure. So there's a kind of evolution. So I don't think I should be involved in productizing things, but there's very value to be still with a hands-on, so you have a very still firm understanding of the technology that you're dealing with.
Okay, great. So for sort of taking a slightly different angle, if you were to give some advice to some of the young cybersecurity professionals that are entering the industry today, what kind of sort of career trajectory advice would you give them? What are the basic fundamental things that you think they should be doing right now?
So I think the first fundamental is they need to program. Right? I need to program in like 2, 3, 5, 20 languages, right? Because you need to get a wide breadth of learning and read a lot of code and be able to digest that very easily. And then you need to learn how to hack, right? Literally, they need to know how to find security vulnerabilities because there's something in your brain that happens when you pop that box, when you find that vulnerability, right? I find it really weird and really hard to think about defensive coding until I understand the side effects. I think there's an evolution to it because once you understand the side effects, you can now think about defending, which is actually much harder. It's much harder to write secure code than is to exploit it, right? Because exploit is just to find one thing. And then if you exploit it, you have a lot better mental models and you have to build much better things. So I'm actually writing a book for what I call Generation Z developers, which is kind of the next generation. So Generation Z is the next generation that's coming along. But I kind of, in a way, I'm limiting to that world because it helps me to have a focus. But a lot of people read it already said, like, this is much bigger than just Generation Z. In fact, that's the book I want to give to people. Say, look, this is why we hire, and this is what we're looking for. And in there, I talk about these things. I talk about Creative Commons, open source, developing, how you think, why books are so more important than digital books, right? Because it's a much more physical thing. You learn better, and all these practices and patterns that I view that's how you really become a well-rounded professional. And I think security is a very sweet spot because security is the only people in the whole business that has access to everything, right? If you think about it, we're the only ones that can talk from the board to all the way the bottom part of the company. and everybody in the middle. And we have a mandate to do that. And we have the mandate to get data from it. Like, in fact, not even top-level execs can do that, right? Because they don't have sometimes that mandate. So security is very uniquely positioned to be a business intelligence driver for the business. Like, we could be enablers. So we can give better solutions so that the business can say, okay, cool, I want to do X. And we say, here's the easiest way, and it's also the more secure and is the more effective way of doing that. And I think there's some really great challenges to be solved in the security space.
So just to really to close off then, what would you say is the biggest threat versus the biggest challenge you have over the next sort of 18, 24 months?
I think the biggest threats that, I think companies like, I would say Photobox have, right? And is just getting all the processes and the workflows right. Is the fact that the business now wants to accelerate even more, and we have to make sure that every time they choose a new SaaS platform, we kind of go there and going, okay, well, let's make sure the data is protected and make sure the connections is done. And is that speed that the business is gaining to make sure that we could still let the business do that while protecting the assets. Which I think that's the challenge, right? And meanwhile, we still have to make sure the factories are working, and then there's legacy stuff that you have to address. Sure. So it's kind of those fundamentals that we still need to get, and allow then the business to accelerate even more.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dinis, and good luck with the new book. I wish you all the success. And thank you very much again for allowing CyberTalks in today.
No, it's great to have you guys in our brand new office, which is a great place to host the kind of events. So very happy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.